The Means to an End by its_Kingston on AO3. Episode 10, Chapter 6. Despite it being midday, the forest was nearly as dark as the nights Uraraka spent without lit candles in her tower. Uraraka looked upwards, surveying the light level through the trees as they walked deeper in. With each step, more visibility was lost, and all that remained was the feeling of Toga's hand in hers. I thought we were almost there, Uraraka said quietly. The darkness pressed against her like a weight, and the words came out a whisper. While she didn't fear Toga, and not a single thing about the rogue having ill intent had crossed her mind, Uraraka worried about the disadvantageous situations they'd be in if a creature of the forest grew near, their stomachs empty. We're here, Toga assured her. I told you we meet here to discuss foliage from following us round us. Look around you. You'll spot the others in a moment. Before Uraraka could say another word about being unable to see well enough to do so, or about the animals sinking around them in the shadows, the ones she could swear she could hear, softening their footsteps and drawing their breaths shallower, quieter, Toga took a breath in. She whistled briefly. A short tune it was, though from what song Uraraka was unsure. Almost as soon as that stopped, movement began anew. To the right, an orange light suddenly appeared, roaring to life. It casted shadows darker than the forest itself, harsher colors that put an autumn tint to Toga's hair as she walked towards the light, careless. Uraraka hurried behind her, not asking the obvious question. This light was the product of the Legion. They had arrived. The origin of the light became apparent as they pushed past the final wall of cramble in a circle of pine trees. Stumbling into the clearing, a campfire was lit in the center, resting in a hug dull into the earth. Little rocks surrounding the edge and twigs were scattered around the pit. On the ground, near the fire, rested two figures. Good to finally join us, said the man sitting across the fire. He had a long branch resting in his lap, one end charged from the steering of the fire and keeping it alive. He looked disinterested, like he drifted off to sleep at any moment. Yet he absolutely poked at the fire, keeping the smoke coming in puffs. A blackened strip of leather was tucked nearby, though he didn't touch it. Took me longer than expected, Toga replied. I see the others have yet to arrive. No, we arrived early. Dobby had us move from the inn, the other man said. There was a bite to his voice, but on the fire-illuminated face was an easy smile. He would not cease his attempts at betting the innkeeper? The other man, presumably the Dobby mentioned in both the man's tale and Toga's story, said nothing. Scandalous, Toga said, shaking her head. There was a light smile on her face, a smile that Uraraka had hardly seen. Not quite as soft as the one she'd given the princess. Toga dropped down beside the fire, placing one of the statues nearby. The other was on Uraraka's shoulder, which she put beside the one Toga had placed. Uraraka figured, following, as Toga did was the best thing to do at the moment. I'd imagine he didn't want you due to your lackluster conversation skills. Tell me, did you insult him and ask his name in the same breath? Toga continued. Perhaps, though I see no issue. I got his name, and when I did, he simply had to work to attend to. We were not kicked out by him, but due to another unfortunate passerby, Dobby said. It is no right of yours to be telling lies, Jin. Not when I had to carry your sorry self back to the inn after you attempted to sleep in the pub. Jin slammed his hand into the dirt, causing a little puff to spring up. The bartender there pours the best drinks I've ever tasted. It is though no fault of mine that I slept at his counter. Enough harping on me. Who is it you brought along, Himiko? The woman you mentioned in your message? Yes. I never saw Kigo again. I was unsure whether you got my message, Toga said. The two men looked over at her, and Uraraka offered a slight wave. Her face was twisted into an attempted smile as she looked between them. Her heart was thundering against the side of her chest, mind swimming with only one thought, now that she stood there, facing the Legion. What if they recognize me? Toga reached up, her hand caging Uraraka's. The rogue pulled lightly against her, attempting to coax Uraraka to sit down. Uraraka tried to look back towards her, but could hardly see through her watering eyes. She was unsure if she'd cry, or if shedding tears when nervous was even considered crying. She hadn't thought of it, didn't think to, didn't want to. But a group of people who ran from the crowd was bound to have at least a single member who wanted her dead. More, perhaps. Now it was all she could consider. Her breath was tight in her chest, like there was too much air in there, but not enough to breathe. She must have looked as bad as she felt, for Toga stood from the ground quickly, her eyes searching Uraraka's face. Chaco? Her name was feather light from Toga's lips, a question and reassurance simultaneously. Hearing it calmed her mind, eased the racing of her heart. Her presence, Toga's hands in hers, was a reminder that she wasn't alone. There was someone by her side who she trusted, who had helped her and made her life better by simply existing there. Might we... Uraraka raised a hand, shaking fingers, pointing towards the direction they'd come. Go, for a moment. She felt her eyes on her, and willed herself from keeping from crying. They were not malice, but curious, yet they felt one and the same to Uraraka at this moment. Of course, Toga said quietly. She looked at the man near the fire, then stepped forward, putting herself in front of Uraraka. We'll be back well before it's time to leave for home. Dobby waved a hand to the forest. Have at it. Hardly a light to see by in there. Jin hadn't said anything in reply, though he turned his gaze down to the fire, watching it flicker. The shadows that danced across his face with each snap of the fire were thicker than any mask. It was soothing, in a sense, not being watched as intently. Her thoughts still lingered on the options of the pair. One she could only imagine. There would be more of them, and her luck would eventually run out. Luck that started with the rogue very well could end with her too. Uraraka wasn't sure if she squeezed Toga's hand first, or if it was an attempt to put Uraraka at ease on Toga's part, but the feeling was grounding. She hadn't paid attention to when they began walking or what direction they went in. But when Toga stopped to turn and look at Uraraka, her face was lit by the dimmest trace of the firelight. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Her free hand was up, resting on Uraraka's arm at her elbow. Uraraka could feel the cold metal of the ring she wore as it pressed against her arm, but found the contrast to be pleasant. Are they good people? Uraraka asked. Her voice was quiet. She wasn't sure if she had attempted to make it as such. No, I don't believe we are. In the faint light, it was hard to read her expression. Uraraka stepped closer, one part changing whether she could see Toga's face better or not, the other simply wanting to be nearest to her. I asked poorly, Uraraka admitted. What I was to say was, you were sent to kill the Prince of Yue, and I am the Princess of May. Who's to say? I'm not to say. They will do no harm, Ochako. They know not of your title, nor your past, and will not ask of such. We are here because we do not want to be tied to our past, so they will not ask of your own. Toga said hastily. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Uraraka's. Her hand slid up Uraraka's arm, gently, yet it sent sparks through her. And if they come to know, they will not act against you. At least not to invoke my wrath. Uraraka smiled at her. First, a tentative smile, but it rose higher as she looked in Toga's eyes. There was something swirling in them, something Uraraka could see even as the dark it was. Little embers, perhaps, the ones that flew in the fire, were locked away in her golden eyes, glowing warm. Thank you, Uraraka said softly. Their proximity assured that Toga heard her, no matter how quiet she spoke. Uraraka lifted her hand to cup the side of Toga's face. Her thumbs stayed across Toga's cheeks and received a grin in return. But of course, Toga began. If you like, you can stay here a bit, alone, if you'd rather, though simply say the word and I'll remain by your side for as long as you like. Uraraka leaned back, though her hands remained pressed to Toga's cheek. Forever is quite a long time. I'm unsure if you'll be able to. Toga's eyes widened at that. Her lips parted. Yet she didn't speak for several moments. When she did, it was precisely by a laugh. Feeling like a jester. I will sit with you, though, if that's what you want from me now. Come on, let's sit. Without another word, Toga floated away from her. First, it had been her own hand coming up to guide Uraraka's hand from her face. Then it was their fingers untangling. It left Uraraka feeling cold, stranded. She watched Toga walk to the base of one of the forest's many pine trees. Whether due to the darkness or merely a statement to the towering heights of it, Uraraka could no longer see the top of the massive tree. Pine needles littered the ground from prior seasons, proof of the tree top's existence blanketing over the rockets and potential creatures. Snakes. Careless, or perhaps purposeful ignorant of what could be lying beneath her, Toga took a seat at the tree's base. She leaned against it, arms tucked behind her head, and legs crossed by the ankles, backlit by the shimmer of the fire tents a feet away. Toga relaxed. Uraraka looked on for a moment, her eyes climbing over the other woman. Her hair was splitting across her shoulder, a spray pine needle tucked into it. Sparks of fire that drifted through the wind cast hard shadows, ones that played with reality. Toga smiled, and Uraraka swore there was animalistic fangs present. She stared forward at Toga's beckoning, boots crunching through the layers of dead pine needles. It was the only noise between them for a moment, the fire distant enough to where they couldn't hear its crackling. If she strained her ears, Uraraka could catch a conversation between the pair nearest to the fire. It felt as though they were the only ones in the world, something Uraraka had felt for quite a while. Despite the pull to lean and grow, she wasn't sure if she wanted to let go of their shared solidity just yet. Looking down at the woman who'd shown her so much in their time spent together already, Uraraka found herself arriving at a simple thought. This one was not terrifying as the other was. Not as much. She sat beside Toga, moving closer until the shoulders were touching. Not as terrifying as the realization of what was possibly impending death at the Legion's hand, but more stifling. A decision that felt so against everything she had dreamed of that it seemed criminal to choose. Yet, she always wanted to fall in love. If I were to ask to pick between seeing you and seeing the world, I think I very well pick the former. Uraraka said suddenly, before Toga could respond. She continued talking. A hand picked up a pine needle and spun it nervously between fingers. I'd certainly miss the world. Yet I do not believe it'd be nearly as grand without you by my side. For that, and for that alone, I despise you, Himiko. Light I thought was once from the sun, was from you all along. Without it, I fear my world would be rather dark, and I am not fond of such a colorless dream. One moment of silence stretched into two, and Uraraka worried she'd be burned for bearing her soul in such a way, wondered if the sweet things Toga had said to her, if her claim of love, still held true. Uraraka didn't question whether it was true, not when she recalled the way Toga's eyes shone with something so serious and demanding she could. A quiet reply shook her from her daze. Why? She asked. Uraraka looked forward, stayed still, hoping this was something they could grow past, something they wouldn't have to let her stranded in the forest. She would find her way out, as she agreed, with Toga. Uraraka was no helpless princess. She'd climbed from her own tower with the guidance, and knew much more than the band of rogues when it came to books. Toga was not her savior. That did not mean Uraraka wished to leave her side, though. Alright, I'm cutting it there because I'm evil. And did I mention I'm evil? And did I mention that I am evil times 2 evil? Yes, exactly. I am one evil person. Why have they not smooched yet, Kingston? It is chapter 6. I require for them to smooch. I require for their lips to meet precisely at the same moment and for their lips to interlock. Why have they not kissed? Kingston, Kingston, riddle me this, Kingston. Why have they not yet kissed? I'm waiting, Kingston. Why have their lips not yet touched? Also, Kingston, can you write a little more? We're almost done and I don't like this. I don't want to say goodbye to you. No, I'll just start doing your one-shots. No. Those one-shots, I will save it for when my one-shots sections come back, and I will be doing all of your one-shots, Kingston, instead of very desperately trying to cling on to your one-shots. Yeah, that was desperate, even for me. I'll admit that. That was very desperate, even for me. Okay, so I'm gonna go see if maybe one of your one-shots is long enough to be turned into a series. Otherwise, I'm not gonna be doing 2-episode series. That's more of like one-shots. That's more of like that should be one-shots kind of situation. So, okay. What was I gonna say? They should be smooching. I know you said Hawks was here in spirit because Hawks was supposed to be a bird, but like it still took me aback when I saw that Hawks was their messenger bird. Also, the fact that what's it called? Space Cat, your mic left. The fact that I have words I have meant to say, but I cannot yet say. Yes, okay. The fact that Dobby wanted to quote-unquote bed someone, in my head, I thought it was going to be Hawks, but then I remembered, right, Hawks is a bird, and it would be weird if Dobby tried to bed a bird. It's one thing if it's My Hero Academia with quirks. I mean, that makes sense. But this is a quirkless world, so it would literally just be Dobby trying to bed a literal fucking bird. Look, I like hot wings, but like, I'm not that desperate. What I am desperate though is for them to be smooching. Kingston, why has Toga and Uraraka not kissed? Are you not? What is this? What is this slow burn? Kingston, you don't do slow burn. Kingston, this is slow burn. Kingston, you have done a slow burn, and it is my heart. I cannot. No, you burn me, Kingston. Kingston, you burn me. Kingston, you have burned thy. Anyways, okay. I like this chapter, and I cannot wait to read the following bit of this. So, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.